Hello there. I'm Rich Zabel with Diversified. I run the media supply chain discipline here. I work primarily with our customers and our internal engineering staff and all of our vendors to make sure that we provide the best solutions possible for media supply chain solutions in the not only the sports world, but the entire M&E world. First, let me introduce Trevor Morgan, CEO of OpenDrives. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Hi, my name's Trevor Morgan. I am the CEO of OpenDrives. I really don't like to talk about myself a lot, but I'll indulge you. Why am I listening to this guy? I've been affiliated with OpenDrives since 2018, but it was a few years after that that I joined them full time. We're surrounded by people who are media and entertainment experts. I did not grow up in the M&E space. I'm actually a 30-year veteran of the software industry. I started that journey post academia in a very small startup that was acquired by Cisco Systems. And from that point to this, I've really focused my career on understanding customer requirements and turning that into product vision. They call that product management. And I've worked with lots of technologies from general networking and security, perimeter security, firewalls, all the way through data analytics, text analytics, and obviously data storage. As I enumerate all of those different technologies, I'd like to use a phrase that I'll bring up again. All of those different technologies I consider to be data services. Those are things that occur to data, whether it's analytics to try to understand it. Data storage is a data service, taking it and putting it on media and then recalling it. So I like to think of myself as somebody who's done a lot with data services.
That's great. Thank you. Next, let me introduce Weston Carter. He's a member of my team. He's a technical sales consultant. Weston, fill us in on your background.
Yeah, so I came to Diversified several years ago and focusing in the media supply chain area, specifically with media asset management, storage, content manipulation, transformation, AI enhancement, transcoding, and automation. So, in my role, we're always looking to scope the right solutions for the customer. Storage is a big component of that because video obviously takes more and more space over the years as capacities continue to grow and try to adapt to accompany everything from that standpoint. Prior to my time at Diversified, I worked in sports, worked in at the university level, did everything from broadcast engineering to running, doing content for social media, doing anything for TV shows and traveling with teams. And then social media took off and just absolutely ballooned. So my background has been primarily with a sports aspect in mind with very, very quick turnarounds up until my time with Diversified.
That's great.
Mhm.
So recently we worked on a big project with OpenDrives for the Cincinnati Reds, and we're very proud of what we're able to accomplish there. Weston, can you tell us a little bit about what the Reds considered? Were they looking at cloud? Were they looking at on-prem? And what were the solutions that they were considering?
So when the Reds came to us with this, they were looking at obviously a storage upgrade, and we said, "There's where do you want to go?" We spent some time with them trying to understand what are your requirements. Do you have editors that are primarily on-prem? Do you have a distributed workflow? And ultimately, OpenDrives checked all the boxes for that. And around that, they have Telestream transcoding on-prem. They have a media asset management system that's also on-prem. So continuing that in with shared storage on-prem made a lot of sense for their workflow with a very venue-driven agenda for all the different displays that they have and all that content editorial workflow was primarily driven online on-prem.
Yeah, there's a lot of hype about the cloud and why everybody should use it. Trevor, why do you think this customer chose a traditional on-prem solution as opposed to a cloud-based solution?
You know, we work with a lot of customers and prospects who are really struggling to determine where's the best place for our content and what's the best way for our workflows to access that content. I'm gonna boil it down to three words. I would say the first word is control. And by the way, control is not a bad word. If you've just invested a whole lot of money into a brand new Maserati, you probably want to control it. You want to have it near you. You want to have it in your garage under lock and key, maybe, rather than sitting out in some some parking lot somewhere. And I think a lot of people look at their most valuable asset, and content is, in my opinion, the most valuable asset, and they want to control it. They want to know where it is, they want to know how to get to it, and they want that access to be very, very performant. So I think there's a comfort level in looking at on-premise capabilities and weighing it against cloud. I think the second one is cost. And I know that we've all spent the last 10 years hearing that cloud resources and cloud capabilities are the most cost efficient way to go. And I'm not throwing shade on that. Cloud does many wonderful things for our customers and prospects, and it can be cost efficient in ways. In other ways, it can actually kind of create a shock when you are accessing a lot of very large and complex video from the cloud and pulling it either to the edge or back on site and working with it. That can create some egress fees, and those can add up quickly. So I think that cost is a second issue for them. So we've got control and cost, and I think the third is performance. When we look at the M&E industry, when we look at sports organizations, all of these organizations are working with very complex video, very large video sets, and they're doing it in real time. And they need the most performant resources, including the data storage that's going to be handling those workflows. And I think then that makes them consider, can I do this in the cloud, or at least partially or full on pulling it onto an on-premises system? Is that the right way to go? We hear time and again from our customers, and we say to our prospects that if you want to ensure the most control and cost efficiencies, as well as having the most performant support for those workflows, I think that's the reason that teams like the Reds do that.
Perfect sense.
Yeah.
But are there uses for the clouds in the sport or the cloud in the sports environment? Where do you see it?
Absolutely. You know what? I always think of a pendulum, right? And if the pendulum's swinging back and forth, and we have on-premise on one side and we have cloud on the other, I think that there's a great swath of that spectrum in between, and we call that hybrid. And I think this is the reason that we try to become very consultative with our prospects and customers. And as we worked with the Reds and other organizations, we need to understand what is the best approach. And I would say that usually it's not an all-in on cloud or even an all-in on premise. It's finding the right hybrid mix so that those workflows can achieve what they need to do. And ultimately, the content is where it needs to be. I think hybrid is the name of the game here.
Hybrid is where we're seeing most of our customers go, whether it be sports world or other worlds as well. So why do customers, in your opinion, start with I'm all cloud or I'm all on-prem, and don't just start with a hybrid solution?
I think I can use two words for that. One is innovation, and the other, well, I'll start with innovation. And I look around here, and we have a lot of technical innovators, and people who are hands-on technical innovators like to take something that's emerging and take it to its furthest extent to see, what can this do? I want to explore it to its fullest extent. And I think that as we've done that over the past 10 plus years with cloud, we've seen all of the wonderful things that it can do with accessibility and spinning up and tearing down resources at need. So I think that innovation is one of those things that is really important here. I think the other side of that, I think I'm just going to end with innovation. I think that we take that to its extreme, and then we realize the other side of that can also be very intriguing. And why go all in on one side or the other?
So, Weston, you're intimate with the sports environment. You're dealing with it almost every day. Where do you see customers starting out? What's their propensity, and what are the reasons they start looking one way or another before they, in many cases, wind up in a hybrid solution?
Right. Oftentimes customers start with what they know, right? And a lot of times they start with on-prem storage because they also come over from working with local content, and that's what they're comfortable with. They move to an all on-prem model, and then they find maybe that isn't the most flexible for them. And at the end of the day, they need the performance, but they need the flexibility. They find themselves inheriting traditional IT tools. You find everything that's not necessarily tuned for media and entertainment. And with these larger files, they tend to get a lot more performance issues. And at the end of the day, you're finding that hybrid is where you need to be, but you need to find the best compromise in that performance approach.
What are the formats that the Reds are using, and has that helped drive the decision?
So the Reds have their control room is at a 1080 60p control room, and they have a lot of content coming out of there from game records and melts that gets pushed over to OpenDrives content, and then they have independent creative shooters that are going out and they're doing that shooting on Sony cameras that can go up to 4K. So that alone in itself adds a whole nother wrinkle to the equation to say, well, you're editing in 4K on a day-to-day basis with very fast turnarounds, needing to push content out in the middle of a game for your social media platforms.
Would the cloud have supported that?
Not with the turnaround times that they were needing right out of the gate. No.
So, Trevor, what are you seeing from a formats and expectations perspective from other customers that you're dealing with?
I think Weston was already speaking to the fact that video is just going to continue to get much more complex. It's going to, resolutions are going to go higher. Now we talk a lot about AI and what's going to happen with synthetic video creation and even AI optimized video. This is simply going to create a situation where video is going to become more and more unwieldy, and with timeframes reducing down to real-time workflows, we've got a real problem there. And that's why our prospects and our customers come to us. I think the assumptions, or as you call them, the expectations, are pretty straightforward. With video going through this never-ending evolution of complexity, they're going to need more capacity. They're going to need the content where it needs to be. And we were talking just earlier, is that in the cloud? It might be. Is it on premise? It might be. It might even be out at the edge. You may have a remote office out in Omaha, Nebraska, with some creatives working on it out there. Now you've got this problem of very large video data sets being in maybe even multiple locations, and services like data storage have to support all of that. So the expectation is going to be highly performant and also to support not just data at rest. I think we think of storage as, okay, just put it on media until it's needed again. Data never rests anymore. It is constantly in motion. And the expectation is that our solutions will support that.
Yeah. So, Weston, what are you seeing for the future of pro sports and storage technologies?
So for the future of pro sports, it's never-ending resolutions going from 4K to 8K to 16K. Sports organizations have some of the most unbelievably flexible workflows out there because we're seeing LED courts. We have these Halo large video displays. We've got IPTV systems. We have menu boards. We have video boards. We have ribbons. We have takeover moments in games with content coming from external partners that is created that you have to play out in venue. You have so much content coming to you. And then you have the pre-production side of this, right? Where you're actually going out and acquiring green screen material and rendering graphics. So the content it's exploding that's going into these large format displays. And one project that you have in an organization can drive you going from a 1080 control room to saying, we're now a 4K control room and we need to shoot in 6K or 8K to conform and finalize our content in 4K. So where I see this going is data sets are exploding. People are having to have more data available at their fingertips very, very quickly, and it's only going to continue to grow.
Sports is always at the cutting and bleeding edge of where the technology is going. Mm-hmm. We're seeing that evident throughout the trade show floor here at NAB. Mm-hmm. So what are the other parts of the industry learning from sports, and what do you think that impact is going to be?
Mm-hmm. So M&E is moving faster than it ever has, and sports is, as you said, it's the tip of the spear, typically with these new technologies. So we're seeing things that we have never seen come into our sports production. So we're seeing AR and XR. We're seeing everything from these court systems going out there to now saying, what if every single NBA team now had their own LED court and you had to have advertisements on the court between gameplay and rolling videos between this? It's a whole nother trend setting moment for how we look at sports. And the amount of content your fans are experiencing in these venues and also expect on social media, they don't want to leave the stadium and not have a connection. You don't want that either. You want to continue with that connection with your fan base. They want to be able to continue that throughout. So at the end of the day, you don't want there to be a disconnect. You wanted to complement your teams and your focus and your engagement with your fans. So you're continually churning your content around and repurposing it time and time again. So making it accessible is an unbelievably important effort at the end of the day, and making it so you can find it and get to it and use it for quick turnarounds.
Very interesting. That's really insightful. So Trevor, CEO of OpenDrives, you got some decisions to make, right? Are you going to go on-prem? Are you going to go in cloud? You're going to go hybrid? We've got all these wild formats, and formats keep getting more higher resolutions. So what are you going to do to drive OpenDrives forward in terms of the coming short-term and long-term? And where are you going to take us from a technology perspective?
Yeah, we've been. I say we as OpenDrives. I think every company that provides data and content storage is on the same journey. I think if you think back 10 years ago, data storage or content storage was kind of the yawn aspect of data needs to sit over there for a while until we need it again. As we started our organization over 10 years ago, many years more than that actually. We were traditional NAS storage. We were software sitting on hardware that we designed, and we served that traditional data storage purpose. But over the past 5 or 6 years, first of all, we had to migrate from focusing on both software and hardware to the aspect of this where the value really resides, which is on the software. And so we made a transition from being both hardware and software and providing a NAS solution to being basically software-defined storage. But that was just the first step. Obviously, even in that iteration, we were focusing on on-premise storage. But our prospects and our customers, especially those in the sports organizations where timeframes were collapsing, and obviously the formats and the data sets, video content sets were becoming explosively large. They came to us and really asked us to evolve further. So at one point, we had to take our Atlas software and we had to put it into the public cloud environments, and we call that Atlas Cloud. Then they came to us and said, but wait a minute here. Now we have problems out at the edge. All of our people, and especially after 2020, all of our people aren't located in the same building or even in the same city. They may be across the state or the country. They may even all be located internationally, one from the other. So now you've got another problem. You may have a lot of your video content sitting in a centralized area, but what if on a project by project basis or for certain aspects of the workflow, you need a lot of that video to go out to some localized environment? I'll use some group out in Omaha, Nebraska. So we created a third product called OpenDrives Edge, and that was to serve the purpose of being able to call video content from that centralized area out to the edge and allow those creatives and the workflows to function at the furthest edges of the infrastructure. And then lastly, we realize we're talking about data always being in motion. What about the applications being portable? And so we last fall came out with a data services platform where you can take containerized applications and move those closer to where the data is. So when you look at the infrastructure from that bird's eye view, what you get is data storage truly becoming a data services function, understanding that all sorts of other applications and workloads are working on that video content, and we needed to be prepared to get that content, as you said, Weston, where it needs to be immediately, or even potentially to take those containerized applications and port those around within this infrastructure. So we've become a data services company.
That's fantastic. And we know why we're a strong partner with OpenDrives, and we look forward to the future with that as well. Any closing thoughts, Weston?
Organizations are increasingly looking at ways that they can monetize their content. We're seeing more and more teams doing their own follow series and doing docu-series behind the scenes with their teams and working with different OTT platforms. So at the end of the day, monetizing your content is where people are looking for the next step. How are you monetizing your content when it comes to your in-venue experience? How are you going to monetize it when it comes to your social media experience? How do you monetize and engage with your fans and keep them coming back and wanting to engage with your teams in person? So monetizing that content is incredibly important when you talk about your storage, making it accessible at the end of the day to your workflow. So
That's great.
Mhm.
So we do have a few minutes for questions. If anybody in the audience has got a question for,
Yeah, do you have any, 'cause I've gone into compression schemes, so a lot of this is about compression and getting the data from point A to B. How much are you ahead of the curve on that?
Uh,
Because everything has to be in different formats, and is there a unified format for
you're saying in a customer's environment in terms of
yeah,
working in a certain format, what's the
yeah,
best
say
one we're
everything had to be
finding?
an MP4 and it was gonna be a 4K MP4 environment, and you need to compress it on one end and get it to the other. Do you have to have the software on both ends, or can that just be accepted and converted in real time?
Typically, what we're seeing in most editorial workflows is folks are working with the files either natively from the camera or to a common house format, and then they're going through the final conform based off of that or referencing back to the original high-res media files. So sometimes they're working in a proxy workflow depending on the use case. If they're have some editors that it's just their workstations can't handle it, but usually we're always trying to make sure people understand give yourself some overhead in your storage. Don't go with the performance that you think you need today. Give yourself a roadmap so that your performance can expand and it can scale for the next iteration. But more often than not, we're seeing most people are trying to edit with the content as it stands and trying to not do proxy more. Sometimes it's a requirement, but if you're in the same facility where your content lives, most people aren't looking to start with proxy in the conversation.
e- every customer's got a unique application for what they're doing, and that's part of what we do for the customers. We sit down and we listen, we talk to them about what their needs really are. There is no one size fits all. Everything's a snowflake, right?
And your question really touches upon the fact that yes, if your creatives aren't right there in that same building and they are working either with uncompressed or other challenging formats, that's the reason that we created OpenDrives Edge so that we can have these data sets set automatically to flow out to these edge environments, and then the creatives are working on those in a more localized sense. And even if you're talking about maybe some of the data is out there in the cloud. I spoke about those egress fees. If people are constantly pulling that from the cloud, either to the edge or centralized on-prem, you're going to incur huge egress fees. So this same product that we just released, OpenDrives Edge, also enables people out in these edge environments to take that data from the cloud once, and then the creatives are working directly in a localized sense and not incurring egress fees over and over and over. And also with the more challenging file formats too, it's being cached locally out at the edge.
Okay. If there are any other questions, if not, the three of us will be available once we come off stage to discuss anything you'd like to know more or dig in deeper. Thank you for your time and attention. Appreciate
Y'all.
it.
Thank you.